Welcome into Survivor Analytics. I am your host, Clyde, and today I will be walking through my strategic summary for episode 9 of the Traitors US Season 3. This episode was the culmination of the Carolyn-Danielle rivalry. For weeks, we've been building up to the point where these two targeted each other, and this week, we finally got to see it. I thought that this was one of the best episodes of the season so far, between the chess mission and the shocking results at the round table. Let's jump right in. We can start the episode in the turret where Carolyn and Danielle need to make a big decision on whether to murder another player or run a recruitment. Danielle pushes hard for a Brittany recruitment, which Carolyn immediately shuts down, and for good reason. Danielle obviously had the intention there of roping Brittany into the mix, then cutting Carolyn. I gotta give credit to Carolyn for blocking that move. This entire interaction really reinforces the level of dysfunction in the turret. I think that both Danielle and Carolyn are at fault for that distrust amidst the Traitors. Danielle is the first player to actively target Carolyn, but she makes efforts to reconnect. Carolyn refuses to ever rebuild that relationship. So this entire segment sets the stage for the rest of the episode, and when they can't come to an agreement on a recruitment, they pivot to a murder decision. Danielle pitches Dylan's name, which is insane to me, especially when you consider the fact that Dylan later aligns with Danielle against Carolyn. Knocking him out of the game would have been horrible for her. They also consider Dolores. Dolores is still widely perceived as a faithful that will never get any heat at the round table, but she's fully trusting of the Traitors, and she's not a real strategic threat at the moment. That takes us to Sam, who ends up going home here. To me, the big factor pointing towards the Sam murder is the woman traitor theory. It's widely assumed that one of the traitors is a woman, so Carolyn and Danielle need to keep the other woman around to insulate themselves. Of the four guys, you can't take out Dylan, which I mentioned earlier, you can't take out Tom because he's Tom, and that leaves just Ivor and Sam, and between them, I think that Sam is the more strategically aware player. I also feel that Sam maintained a wider range of connections in the castle. I predicted a Sam murder last week, so this was not a huge surprise for me. It's tough for me to provide any commentary on Sam's run on the Traitors because he was so buried in the edit. Going into this episode, Sam legit had 5 confessionals all season, which is the same number as Dorinda, who was the first murder. Given his lack of screen time, I never thought that Sam had a chance at winning this show. It makes sense for him to go out here. Jumping over to the mission, this was potentially my favorite mission of the season. We had players guessing responses to questions presented to the Traitors the previous night. It's really similar to the touchy subjects challenge that we see on Survivor. What makes this mission so great is that it creates this challenge for the Traitors to participate while knowing the answers to the questions. This segment marks the point in the episode where Carolyn's game starts to lose some stability. We see her really pushing for certain answers, which creates a lot of suspicion. After this mission, we get multiple confessionals from Dylan questioning his alliance with Carolyn. The other big highlight from this section of the episode was the legend Tom Sandoval. Tom's an arrogant guy, and at the start of the season, I found that part of him kind of annoying. Now it's my favorite aspect of Tom, because he's this character that looks at himself so highly despite the rest of the castle not really respecting him. When the players are asked to identify the leader of the pack, you already knew that Tom would campaign for himself in the worst way possible, which was hilarious. Parvati and Kate also make an appearance in this mission. Do we need them here at all? Not really. They roll up to basically work as the unofficial commentators for the afternoon, but I'll never complain about a Parvati appearance on any reality show, so this was all good with me. Anyways, no shields were given out this week, but the mission still felt important in the episode because it naturally encouraged that tension between the Traitors and the Faithfuls. We can take a look at the targeting layout for this week, which was basically the battle between Carolyn and Danielle. Now, before talking about their strategies, I want to discuss this decision to go after each other in the first place. I don't think that it's a good move for either of them. On this season, we have seen a trend of players being perceived as threats after leading the banishment of a traitor. In episode 4, Boston Rob works as the head strategic figure of the Bob vote, and after that move, he struggles to regain trust with the castle. There was no world where Carolyn and Danielle would stick together for the long run, but I don't think that the final 8 was the opportune time for this flip. So we had these two traitors going after one another, each with their number 1 ally. For Danielle, that's Brittany, and for Carolyn, that's Gabby. This leaves 4 swing votes on the board. Leading up to the roundtable, I was getting the sense that both Ivor and Dylan would align with Carolyn and Danielle would go home. After all, there was a solid amount of evidence piled up against Danielle. You had the Jeremy murder in episode 4, which came immediately after Jeremy targeted Danielle. You had Danielle's weird decisions during the Riddle mission, where she seemingly did not care about earning a shield. You had the obvious alliance between Danielle and Brittany that the rest of the castle was interested in breaking up. There was a strong case against Danielle, but Carolyn takes a completely different approach. She hyperfixates on Danielle's history of lying in the game. Carolyn claims that faithfuls have no reason to lie, which I don't necessarily agree with. Obviously, this is an edited show, so maybe Carolyn brought up other points, but I feel like Carolyn had the ammunition to take down Danielle, and she just didn't use it. On the flip side, Danielle's case against Carolyn was not that strong either. She claims that Carolyn has been putting on a show and pretending to appear clueless. While it's true that Carolyn secretly wants the rest of the castle to underestimate her, this argument from Danielle isn't based in any strategic decisions from Carolyn. Yeah, she brings up Carolyn's comments at the mission, but we never hear any analysis on Carolyn's voting history. Carolyn could have won this argument, but she ultimately cracks under pressure. She loses the trust of Ivor and Dylan, and she's taken out in a 4-2 to 1-1 vote. Once again, we see Tom and Dolores basically throwing their votes away at the round table. Every discussion leading up to this moment centered around Danielle and Carolyn. I refuse to believe that Tom or Dolores genuinely thought that they would gather the numbers against their target. Now, you could argue that this is a strategic move by them to lower their threat levels and ensure that the traitors keep them around, but I just don't see it that way. These players do not look at the game through a strategic lens. Dolores has voted against Tom in 3 of the previous 4 roundtables. She has said multiple times that she does not believe that Tom is a traitor. She just wants to knock him out because he's this ineffective faithful. Meanwhile, Tom genuinely thinks that Dolores is a traitor despite all of the housewives going home in the early game. He thinks that Dolores intentionally cut all of her potential allies in the first couple episodes. So if I'm a traitor, I'm looking to keep Dolores and Tom around because I have no trust in them actually seeing past their differences at the round table. So Carolyn ends up going out in the most shocking elimination of the season. Since the premiere, I've had Carolyn as my top contender to win the show, and up until this week, I thought she had done a great job at building a wide range of alliances in the castle while also managing her own threat level. On top of that, there were multiple impressive reads on Carolyn's resume, like her move to murder Chrishell and her decision to stop Danielle from recruiting Brittany. At the end of the day, though, many of my preseason concerns with Carolyn as a player ended up coming to fruition. Before this season, I said that Carolyn is a contestant who has proven her ability to survive in these social strategy games, but she struggles to gain agency and influence other people to work with her. In Survivor 44, she reaches the final tribal council, but she fails to ever pull off a move that separates herself from her allies. Here on the Traitors, when Carolyn's back was up against the wall, she faces the same problem. She can't rally a group behind her despite all of the evidence pointing in the direction of Danielle. So I was really surprised with the Carolyn banishment, and I now need to reconsider my tier list as she was my top pick to win the season. After the Carolyn banishment, Danielle is given the opportunity to recruit another traitor, and to no one's surprise, she picks Brittany. Now, I understand Danielle's rationale with this selection. Brittany is her bestie in the castle, and she wants to play the game on the same team. From a storytelling perspective, I think that this Brittany recruitment is really interesting. We opened the season with Brittany and Danielle declaring each other enemies, but over the past 9 episodes, they've rebuilt that relationship. With both of them now working as traitors, there is an incentive to flip on each other in order to solidify their own safety in the game. We could see this friendship crumble again, and I'm excited to see how that plays out. From a strategic perspective, though, this move makes no sense for Danielle. Brittany was already her closest ally in the castle. I think that Danielle had Brittany's trust whether she recruited her or someone else. The end of this episode hints at Danielle receiving some heat for her role in the Carolyn banishment. Danielle will need allies supporting her at the next round table, so I feel like this recruitment was a lost opportunity for her to build herald new inroads. As for Brittany, this recruitment is great for her game as long as she's willing to cut Danielle. I'm expecting Danielle to come forward as the primary target next week, and if Brittany sticks by her side, she may damage her own reputation going into the finale. Here is the strategic layout looking ahead to episode 10. This week we saw Gabby and Dylan reconnect. Their relationship was a bit sour as Dylan wrote down Gabby's name at 2 of the previous roundtables, but it looks like they're willing to move past that and work together. It's also worth mentioning that after the Carolyn vote, Gabby pitches a Danielle banishment to a group that includes Brittany. That information will find its way back to Danielle, so there is a real chance that Gabby is the target of the next murder. While there are strategic signals pointing towards a Gabby elimination, I feel that the edit doesn't support that theory. Gabby receives so much more screen time than the likes of Ivor and Dolores, so I'm expecting her to make a deeper run. The last thing to cover is my weekly tier list outlining every remaining contestant's chances of winning the season. Only one player in 0 chance, and that's Ivor. Of the 7 players left in the game, Ivor is easily the most under-edited. We occasionally hear his perspective at the round table, where this week he emphasizes the woman traitor theory, but there's no consistent storyline with his run on the show. He's someone that I expect the traitors to take out at some point because he'll never receive votes at the round table. On to unlikely victories. My opinion of Dolores has gradually declined over the course of this season. She's often portrayed as the opposing force to Tom, with Tom receiving much more focus in the edit. She's fully trusting of Danielle, and I don't see her ever catching on to her status as a traitor. When looking towards the endgame, my big question with Dolores is, who does she ride with through the finale? I don't see Dolores tightly aligned with any of the remaining faithfuls outside maybe Dylan. If Dolores finds herself in the end, I think it will likely be with one of the traitors. At number 5, I got Danielle. I understand why Danielle needed to cut Carolyn this week, but I bet that move makes her a top target at the next roundtable. I also disagree with her decision to recruit Brittany as a traitor. I think there's an argument for Brittany being the worst possible selection in that scenario. Strategically, I don't believe that Danielle is set up well for the endgame, and her surrounding edit doesn't point towards a win either. I feel like we constantly get moments and confessionals highlighting Danielle's mistakes as a traitor. Earlier in the season, we hear Boston Rob criticize her overacting, which comes into play after the Carolyn banishment. We also had the entire saga of Danielle giving away shields at the Riddle mission. I know I've been saying this for weeks, but I'm getting the sense that Danielle's time on the Traitors will be coming to a close soon. The only way I see her rebounding from this spot is through some brilliant strategic play from Brittany. On to high upside. Tom has moved his way up to this tier. Could Tom win the season? Maybe, but it won't be due to the strategic legwork of Tom himself. I don't have any trust in this guy's outlook on the game. In my opinion, a deep Tom run hinges on the decisions of the more strategically savvy faithfuls, like Dylan and Gabby. I see Brittany as the most likely traitor to win this season, but I'm not completely sold on her winning stock. I think that Brittany's chances of winning the game fully depend on her approach with Danielle. If she's willing to cut Danielle, then I could see her flying under the radar to the end, but if she sticks by her side, then I bet Brittany is taken out soon after Danielle. It's also worth pointing out that Brittany is one of the better strategic minds left in the game. If she can cut the dangerous faithfuls in Dylan and Gabby, then I could see her running strategic circles around the likes of Tom, Dolores, and Ivor. There's 2 players in my contenders tier. You can flip the order of them and I'd have no issue either way. It's Dylan and Gabby. This was a mixed week for Gabby where on one hand she loses her closest ally in the game, but on the other, that ally was a traitor. I feel that Gabby has less routes to the finale, but more win equity. She's also clocked Danielle as a traitor, which could be bad for her if Brittany brings that information back to Danielle, but it at least proves that Gabby has the right read on how to approach the endgame. As for Dylan, I'll hesitantly put him at the number 1 spot. The edit of this season has highlighted Dylan as one of the more powerful strategic forces. He's the first person to pinpoint Bob as a traitor. During the mission, the rest of the castle picks him as the best leader of the pack. Then at the round table, Dylan is one of the key swing votes in taking out Carolyn. I don't think that Danielle and Brittany will look to take out Dylan anytime soon, as he just aligned with them in the Carolyn banishment. So for now, I'd predict that Dylan and Gabby are the last two standing, making them the winners of the Traitors. So that's everything I have for this episode. Next week, we'll see the introduction of the Seer twist, which I believe made an appearance on other international versions of the Traitors. On Wednesday, February 26th, there's the premiere of Survivor 48, and we'll have a podcast covering that episode going up the following Sunday. And of course, I'll be back next week for my coverage of episode 10 of the Traitors as well. So a lot more to come. Thank you so much for listening.